Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session, How to Make the Shift from Reactive to Proactive Cybersecurity. Hi, by way of introduction, my name is Emily Jarvis, and I'm the Senior Manager for Events here at GovLoop. And today I have the added pleasure of also being your moderator, so thanks so much for joining me. And a special thank you to our sponsors at Rubrik for helping us put on this session today. So let's get right into it because cyber threats are growing more sophisticated, putting agencies in a really tough spot. It simply isn't possible to prevent every cyber breach, yet every single cyber incident can disrupt operations, delay services, and undermine public trust. Therefore, it's time to move beyond a purely reactive approach. So, today, our experts will share their perspectives on cyber resilience and what it takes to make our organizations as secure as possible. But before we get into all of that good stuff, I do have a few housekeeping items to go over with you all. So, first things first, we do have some resources available for you on the console. So, make sure you check those out. This is also where you can find out a little bit more about our speakers today. So make sure you say hello to them, of course. If you need access to that closed captioning feature, just look for that show captions icon along the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and that's where you'll find that added accessibility. Now, of course, we hope you don't have any technical difficulties, but if you do, send us a message through that Q&A tab, and my colleague Maddie will get you all sorted out. You can also use that same tab to submit questions to our speakers, and we want your questions, so don't you dare be shy. Put your questions in early and often. Finally, we are recording this training, so check your inboxes tomorrow because we will email you a link so you can watch the entire session on demand. All right, with all of that housekeeping out of the way, I want to introduce you to our speakers. Joining us today, we have Jay Gasley, who is the Associate Director for Vulnerability Management at CISA. We also have Joanne Wojtek, who is the Program Director for NASA SOUP, and Travis Rosick, who is the CTO for Public Sector at Rubrik. And Tony Bryson is a little out of pocket today, so he will not be joining us, but we appreciate his time nevertheless. All right, so let's get into it. And Jay, I'm going to start with you because there's this phrase out there, proactive cyber resilience. And I want to start with some really basic understanding. What does that mean and what does it look like in a government environment?
Making sure I'm off of mute and you can see my face. Good afternoon to most of you, though maybe some of you are off in places other than East Coast and Central Time. Jay Gasley, Deputy Assistant Director for Vulnerability Management. Um, I'm actually going to focus on the word resilience here
Sure.
because one of the things that we have really grown to appreciate at CISA as we work with both federal and critical infrastructure partners is there's kind of two classes of partners.
Hmm.
And those who know they're going to have a bad day and prepare for it, and those who don't.
Yeah.
And so as I go into a federal agency or a critical infrastructure partner and see, as they're having an incident, there's a marked difference from those who have gone through, done the steps to prepare to be offline, to prepare the comms package to deal with the critical infrastructure stakeholders, and those who haven't.
Hmm.
And that difference is the difference between getting an adversary out in a timely fashion and people sleeping at night, or all of your teams working all of the time trying to succeed in a really stressful moment. So I would just say, like, the prep work is what matters
Hmm.
when you want to be resilient.
Makes a whole lot of sense. Joanne, how would you describe this idea of proactive cyber resilience and any examples you want to share?
So, well, first, thanks for having me here. And secondly, I do want to be upfront. I'm not an expert in the cybersecurity world. I have I am a tech. I do have technical background. I am the ISO for the soup. So I have that, and I do work with CISA and others. I kind of have a broader view
Mhm.
um, than the other panelists. Um, I, I do want to. I, I think um, I think the problem that we one of the biggest problems we have with security,
Mhm.
it's not necessarily directly going to your question, is there are so many terms. So maybe I'm
Yeah.
answering your question by the fact that there's a need for an overall question out there, and so many activities occurring, and so much hubbub, um, that it's it's almost hard to know when you can be reactive or proactive because you're just
Yeah.
not you're just constantly shifting. I do want to agree with Jay on the that preparedness is important. I'll tell you when I had two areas in the technical world, because that's where I come from, that I never wanted to care about. One was networking and the other was security. I've long since that was 20, 30 years ago. Believe me, I've changed. And we now have a team of security folks on our staff, um, and um, and and we're constantly. We just got two major notices from the NASA security team that the actions have to be taken. Constantly seeing the CISA um, information that's coming out, um, and I believe, and I may be wrong, and CISA may go, "Oh, Joanne, you don't know how bad it is at NASA." I believe NASA has a pretty strong preparedness program,
Mhm.
and does it's it's it surprises me when I hear of agencies that maybe have problems because they aren't prepared, because this is so important that you and again, it's almost like you're going back to my old days of 20 years ago. It's like, yeah, who cares about security? Well, you have to now, and you have to pay attention, and well, first you have to react. So you can't take that away. You always have to react because there's always something new, and then you have to look at what's happening that you can put into place to prevent issues from arising before you um, be, in the hopes that you keep it from happening within your system. And there's the simplest things. I was on a panel just a couple of weeks ago with similarly with much more expert security people on it, and I said they're like, "Well, yes." I'm like, "Yeah, but people don't think about this. The easiest thing to do is make sure you're up to date. Make sure that don't ignore those messages. Don't ignore what has to happen to get your security in shape, because there is so much going on there. There's so much noise of what could be happening, um, and don't put security again, as in the old days, as somebody's extra job.
Yeah.
Somebody has to really have that as their, what they are constantly doing, what they're constantly looking for, what can they do to prevent and in advance, and then react as needed. So some thoughts.
No, I appreciate that. Travis, from your perspective, obviously you are working with government partners here. How do you describe this concept of proactive cyber security, cyber resilience? To Joanne's point, there's a lot of terms floating around here. So, what is your definition, and where do you see some use cases happening?
Sure. Yeah. Great points by Jay and Joanne. I think so. Going back to my government time in national security across the Defense Department, I was a change agent, really focused on trying to drive change and be more proactive. So in industry now, I'm trying to focus on incubate new technologies and solve problems still on the proactive side. And so I would say tackling it from a couple of angles. So I would look at reactive cybersecurity as in general, the federal government and most governments are inherently reactive. So the way the acquisition process, requirements process, you palm and plan for money 3 to 5 years. Um, you're kind of you're playing kind of to the past a little bit. So compliance requirements are driving what you do, and from a a SOC, a threat intel perspective, when you're selling, sharing indicators of compromise and collaborating, those things for the most part are things that have happened in the past. So you're constantly looking for things that you're reacting to new compliance requirements. So
Mhm.
typically organizations get funding for security investments, modernization after an incident. So they're reacting after the fact. And usually that costs 10 times more money than if they would have been more proactive and put a fix in or built some mitigation prior to the attack.
Sure.
Or there's a compliance change and they have to go make an investment and do something and react to that. So inherently, that's where, due to limited resources, skill sets, the shortages, all of those things, we've been in this vicious cycle of fighting backwards. And from my perspective, I've been more focusing on the evolution of technology and studying threat actors aggressively and kind of trying to stay a step ahead of them and kind of build for that future. So I kind of look at the proactive side. So I kind of look at the benchmark. So reactive cybersecurity is the ceiling, or what you consider success or secure, is achieving compliance. That's your top. The organizations that are proactive, they look at compliance as the floor or the bare minimum, and they're constantly trying to adapt and evolve, and have, obviously they have to have the right resources and people to go above and beyond minimal compliance requirements. So from that perspective, that's kind of how I look at the proactive side. 100% agree with Jay that, like, you're drilling, you're training, you're exercising before there's a crisis moment. So you have processes, you're exercising, you're drilling, you're training them, you have the capabilities. If you have gaps, you get those addressed before you have a crisis moment. So having endured many crisis moments through my government career and in industry, it's much better. You sleep much better at night. You have more family time if you're proactive. So at the highest level, that's kind of what I would say. Kudos to like CIS's big initiative recently around CI Fortify, trying to drive a lot more proactive nature into our commercial critical infrastructure, which, commercial industry owns most of our critical infrastructure in the country, which we all depend on. That's a great initiative, and it's really focused on trying to drive some of that proactive and that resiliency perspective.
Makes a whole lot of sense. All right. There are a lot of nuggets here that I want to unpack over the course of today's session. And we're getting a lot of great questions into the Q&A portal. So for those that are submitting your questions, thank you so much. I have one more question, and then we're going to get to all of your questions here. And my question, and Jay, I'll start with you again on this one, is listening to the three of you, I think it's pretty clear, that preparation is obviously going to be a big boon in your ability to address cyber threats as they're coming in. But if it was easy, everyone would do it, and they do it with ease. So, what are some of the blockers that you see agencies that you're working with facing as they're looking to become more proactive? It could be culture, funding, legacy, staffing, all the above, something I haven't mentioned. Where do you see those blockers coming into play?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. And I've been really fortunate in my career to have been exposed to, several secretaries of state, like directly, along
Mhm.
with a lot of work in some of the high value assets across the federal civilian executive branch. And what has been a consistent thread about ones that do it well is they have a tight understanding of what they are trying to do and why and how. It is that interlocking between the mission slash business purpose and the IT staff that enables the dialogue necessary to get the budget, time, energy, change control in, a time with a person who has to be part of the restoration process, time with someone who's got to be involved in the incident response process. It's all about that time, and that time only happens when the IT people and the mission owner understand each other, speak each other's language, and are willing to be patient with each other as they talk through the problems that matter most to them.
Yeah. Travis, what would you add to that? I know you were already highlighting some of your challenges in your opening remarks here, but what would you add to that blocker conversation?
Yeah, I think, the if I look at, just awareness of the problem. So
Mm-hmm.
getting the IT cloud security folks, mission owners in the room, understanding what's absolutely critical, what are all the dependencies, what has to work at a minimum, and then how do we make sure we have, what are all the things that could affect it? Where's critical data, and how do we do the restoration process? So if you look at, just having the metrics, the data points of what those requirements are, making sure everybody understands what the requirements are, how long can something be down? Are we testing? Do we have metrics that show that we can recover? Do we have trust in that? And then fundamentally, the next thing, so past lives, running cyber exercises, assessing, doing metrics, NTSB like investigations, post breach, all of those types of things. One thing that's very, I think, a critical gap that most organizations, they're not collecting certain metrics to give them full visibility of their current state. So they make assumptions that they're, more confident, or they have a false sense of security. So if you think, I think the restoration part is completely overlooked. So if you typically look at an exercise, you have your test plans, your scenarios. Red teams emulate threat actors. They're typically handcuffed, so they're very limited on how much time, how much resources that they can do, and what they can actually target. So it's not a good emulation of exactly what the threat is like.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into the SOC and the security folks, and they look at, hey, what did they detect? What didn't they detect? And where were the gaps? And that's typically most of the cyber exercises today. And that whole thing really focuses solely on the attack detection and prevention. What it doesn't do, and it doesn't shed light on the restoration side. So after the incident response team comes in, they don't have the responsibilities to rebuild, reconstitute the environment to a known good state. And that whole process is kind of where, looking at industry and all of the aftermath of major incidents, disruptions, et cetera, looking at the frontier AI initiating attacks into the future, we're going to get at the point where that's really all that's going to matter going forward, right? Obviously, cyber hygiene is uber critical, but supply chain attacks and other things are going to cause disruptions. So how do we make sure the organization is actually training, drilling, exercising, assessing themselves on, hey, does the security people even know what our backups are? Do they know who to contact? How do we know what a good backup is to recover? How do we reconstitute? And spend more of the cyber exercises focusing on the rebuilding side, right? After the hurricane, after the natural disaster, you know, how do we rebuild everything back to a normal state again, as quickly as possible? And I think that's a lot of what like CI Fortify is driving, is trying to change some of that culture and that mindset and drive those requirements. Unfortunately, I think in general, we typically wait for something bad to happen because we believe it won't happen until it happens. So it's kind of, that's the reactive side. So let's not wait for one of those scenarios. I mean, we've already experienced quite a bit over the last few years. Let's not have a catastrophic scenario before we start, having organizations do this testing and focusing on the restoration side. Because if your plan or your fallback is like rebuild everything from scratch, it's going to be a disaster scenario.
Yeah. I always tell this story. We had a speaker come on from we'll just say a mountainous state. And they were talking about they had a cyber breach, an outage that caused their systems to go down. And they realized that the password to the backup system was on the original computer and they couldn't get into the system. And it was something as simple as like not having that information at their fingertips, totally derailed the plan and it took significantly longer to get them up and running. And that's such a minor example of where things can go wrong. But I think to both of your points, it's kind of true that sometimes the low hanging fruit, so to speak, is what can really send things off course, so to speak. Joanne, I know you are coming at this from a slightly different perspective, but where do you see some of the barriers popping up as agencies like NASA are looking to become more proactive when it comes to addressing some cyber threats?
So I've said this for a number of years now, ever since I first went to my first RSA conference. If you're buying a printer, there's like two or three printer companies. If you're buying
Mhm.
routers, there's a couple of network companies. If you're buying security, you go to RSA, and there's not one hall of vendors. There are actually two conference halls full of vendors, plus the hall in between. So pretty much three halls of vendors all selling you the answer to your cyber solution. And it is it is daunting, and I the breadth of both the issues that they are trying to resolve and the possible solutions to resolve them um, is actually itself a blocker to finding the answer, because you only have so many resources to put to it.
Mhm.
How do you what do you direct to get to that solution, whether it's proactive or reactive? And I think it's part of why one of the issues that I've seen. I don't see a lot of issues with how NASA does things. I think we're pretty darn good at it, but because there's all these solutions, I will say it seems like almost every year we have a new solution, so you have to
Yeah,
change everything that we're doing,
right.
and that can be a blocker, because you're always you're spending your time because, oh, this solution now is just a little bit better. They took
Hmm.
care of that one issue, so we're going to shift to that one this year, and now everybody's got to change all of their applications and all of their ways of reporting, um, and we're this is the negative part of being reactive. We're reacting to not just the threats, but also we're reacting to the solutions.
Hmm.
We need to have that broader picture of that can translate to the in a proactive way, that we can say
Hmm.
that this is a solution today. Let's stick with this in a way that is translatable and doesn't require everybody to shift and change what they're doing next year because it's a slightly different thread or a slightly different solution.
Yeah.
So finding some of that balance, I I I I I don't know what the answer is, but I sure hope that for the sake of getting better security, that at some point it'd be really nice if you went into the RSA conference and it was not such a hectic. Everybody has a solution. Then again, you wouldn't have as many goodies to take away.
Well, that's true. That is true. Jay, we got a great question into the Q&A portal that says, if you were assessing a public sector organization, which you do, cybersecurity's maturity today, what are signs that they're operating reactively rather than proactively? Are there kind of red flags that you see where organizations might just be a little bit behind the eight ball, so to speak?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. And I think that unfortunately the reality is most organizations should expect to be reacting. Um, outside of the preparedness work that you can do, threat actors always get a vote. They're going to choose new, techniques, procedures. They're going to come and create a bad day. So, because Travis mentioned CI Fortify, I'm going to just take the bait hard on this. Um, and I just setting some expectations, right? A nation state threat actor, if you are a critical infrastructure partner or a local government, is in all likelihood, if they decide to get into your infrastructure, going to get in. Now, hopefully you see them and get rid of them, but like that initial access is definitely doable. And so one of the things that I care a lot about, and I think everybody cares about a lot here, is drinking water. Right.
Mhm.
We all care about drinking water.
Mhm.
And so how do we know that a local water plant is able to continue to produce water in the middle of a cybersecurity incident, right? Like we don't want a colonial pipeline happening with your faucet, right? And so one of the things we do is we go out and we talk to folks and we drill down and understand, how far down that path of, oh, the internet's out or I have an adversary in my network. Can I still do the job I need to do? This goes right back to that link between IT and business. And to see who's reactive versus proactive, it's actually a little easier than maybe people think. If you go to the IT, an average IT human, and you say, hey, what is the business purpose of the system? What are you trying to do? What's the outcome you're trying to drive by running this infrastructure? And if they can clearly tell you up and down, the row, this is what I'm trying to do, chances are that organization is in the right place. It just time and time again, people who are understanding and invested in their mission and understanding their infrastructure are able to protect that infrastructure because they're able to make a risk-informed decisions right down at the lowest level possible. And usually those decisions are pretty good, because people who are in this industry aren't in this industry to, have systems be off. They're here to have systems be on and functional and responsive to their users. So it always goes back to culture.
It always does. If only the technology implementation could be the culture implementation of a technology could be as simple as the technology itself sometimes. I word myself into a wordle there, but I think that the culture and change management piece is always going to be one of the most difficult elements. Travis, I'm going to let you out onto what Jay said here in a second, but I also got a great question into the Q&A portal following up on kind of something you said earlier. And the question says, I'm glad you mentioned supply chain attacks. I was just in a meeting and my supervisor was not even sure what this means and was it a catch-all category? So can you explain what are some of the supply chain attacks, compromises, and why that's something that an agency should be keeping a close eye on?
Sure. Yeah. So just real quick, adding totally agree with what Jay was saying. I think, from my perspective, having done assessments as well over the years, a very simple question. Obviously, the ownership and the mission and the purpose, all good litmus tests to see where folks are. But another maturity aspect is I like to ask folks in your organization, individually ask them, like, who is responsible for security? And if people, the leadership and anyone in the organization tries to single out a specific person or team, the CISO is responsible or the security team, that's usually where early warning signs of some of that gaps in maturity. But if the people and the culture is everybody's responsible for security in the organization, like those organizations, they're kind of all swimming in the same direction, kind of where Jay was going. Specifically on the supply chain. So the adversaries and looking at frontier AI involved in the attacks, software supply chain attacks, hardware supply chain attacks. There's been plenty of examples of these. Obviously 0 days, and then just last year alone, just known vulnerabilities, there was 50,000 identified in the wild. So if you look at the vulnerability management or unmanagement or mismanagement, it's quite the problem's getting worse, right? So I kind of look at software, as a consumer, all of us, we like things that work. So if you go to a car dealership, you want the car to be able to be drivable off the lot. Software is the only thing that we buy that comes broken. So if you buy a new cell phone, an iPhone, Android, a laptop, the first thing it does is do updates, right? So it's constantly trying to fix problems. So what that means is there's massive amounts of opportunity for whatever's in those updates and the software and all the dependencies, which as a consumer or a customer, you don't always know what is it open source? Where's the open source software maintained? What are the different mechanisms? So software supply chain attacks is where you have a trusted software update or hardware that comes into your environment through a trusted means. And typically it bypasses a lot of the security controls and checks because it's invisible to most of your security monitoring components, right? So that's kind of where the adversary, they just have to get lucky once, and they have, just last year, 50,000 opportunities to get in that we know about. Then they have supply chain. Let's go after one organization or one product. Let's attack once and gain access to many hard targets versus let me try to get into all of these individually and try to get caught. So the economy of software supply chain attacks is increasingly more enticing to threat actors. So I think from a proactive nature, organizations also need to start thinking about and planning for, hey, what if there is a software supply chain attack? The next SolarWinds type of an attack comes in. Are we prepared? How are we going to deal with that, right? So, I kind of look at that from that perspective.
Gotcha. Makes sense. All right. We are rapidly going through today's training. And I want to do the next couple of questions in a rapid fire format so we can get through as many as we possibly can. And Joanne, I'm going to start with you. One of the challenges that I think organizations have is that they're trying to protect everything, and there should be protections in place, but there are systems that are more critical than others. How do you decide what critical services, what they are, and then build the protections around them to keep those systems running first? What kind of perspective do you think, in terms of prioritization, perhaps?
Well, it's not. I would say I'll give more of a perspective of what I hear from our customers, and
Sure.
it is an interesting note too that kind of also goes with supply chain thing. There's way that my favorite like laughing question I get from my customer is, how do you make sure what is Soup doing to make sure that we are 100% risk free of any supply chain issues?
Ah.
What do you do? Yeah, and there is and the belief is comes from the level of every level, and and
Hmm.
and there's even there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. I guess my point about what you can do about security, and to your point, at what level are you going to focus on?
Hmm.
And so we have my personally and my own system. We have tried to make sure we're always moderate by not putting things on our system that would make us needing to be secure, because
Right.
you gain a risk, and you need more resources to cover that risk. So for example, we're doing procurements. We do not have a credit card, and we get this from our customers all the time. Like, I do not want credit cards on my system, because once I have credit card information on my system, then I better be highly secure. But if I don't have that, if I'm keeping it to the level of it's on other people's systems and I'm not going to have it, I can mitigate that risk. But unfortunately, I don't think the customers think that way all the time, and they need to think about that there's a risk involved, and you can only get so much percentage. They also tend not to read. We don't have anybody from NIST here, but you get NIST says you have to do this. I'm like, well, NIST says you have to
Yeah.
do this for the highest level of security. They also say if you're doing a moderate or you're doing a low, you can do different levels. So it's very
Mhm.
important for I don't have an exact what the
Sure.
difference is, but I do think that um, we haven't done a good job of informing the customers of the difference between a moderate and a high, and what their expectations should be. Now, they always need to be part of security. They always need to do
Sure. Yeah.
correct, but is certainly that level that I don't think it's talked enough about that importance. Um, I, on the flip side of a moderate, I've had people who build ships saying, well, I have to make sure that the screws are, the supply chain of the screws
Uh-huh.
because there could have been something put in that screw, and it has to come from a certain, they have to be so tight on it because it's a nuclear submarine.
Right.
And that's a whole lot different than what goes on my desk, here in my office. And we have to recognize that happens, and accept
Hmm.
the fact that changes the risk factor.
No, that's a really good point. I saw Jay's eyes get really big when you said that some of your customers are out there saying, "We want no risk,"
Well,
which
I mean, no
honestly,
risk of supply chains. Like what are the chances that on Soup? Yeah, I don't think you guys have a requirement that everybody publish an SBOM with complete depth of analysis, right? And until we as an industry demand that every manufacturer provide an entire SBOM that says what your software is made out of, like we're not even in a space of having a discussion about a supply chain attack. Like it's like it's actually kind of funny. Like people are expecting that we can have yeah, everybody gets a free car, but nobody has a driver's license even. Like it just, yeah. So like, we're still a couple of years away from having the basic data available to ourselves to understand a supply chain attack. So it's kind of a funny little like, yeah, nobody's going to be risk free on that front because nobody's actually saying what's in the software.
Yeah. All right, Jay, I'm going to stick with you here, and I'm really going to make you think about the next 3 months because I think sometimes when we talk about cybersecurity and overall kind of strategy and planning, it's big picture, and it should be big picture, but we want to drill down a step here. So let's get a little bit practical. If you
Yeah.
were in the driver's seat of some of these agencies, what would a change be that they could make this quarter, this year, that meaningfully could limit the blast radius, so to speak, when a incident hits?
So if I was running an agency
Uh-huh.
or government organization, I would do three things. First, I would ensure that I didn't have any SSL VPNs touching the internet. They're the number one way that threat actors are getting in. So I'd make sure that I had a different technology directly touching the internet. Second, because I know that the first thing a threat actor is going to do when they get in is going to be, mess around with the identity of the
Mhm.
users. I would ensure that I had zero humans or with who did not have MFA.
Mhm.
Not, 100%. It's the other way. You have to go down to zero because otherwise threat actors are gonna get in. And then third, I would do everybody's least favorite activity, which is turn everything off and try and
Mhm.
turn it back on. Folks may be surprised at how that is a plus plus difficult activity to do the first time. The second time it's okay, and the third time it's actually really easy. But if you're in a position where you have to do a cold restore or you shut down the infrastructure to ensure that you don't have a blast from a ransomware, totally, reasonable response. Um, the act of just trying to turn everything back on and ensuring that your storage array are getting time sync, like all of this technical mumbo jumbo nonsense, it's an incredibly valuable activity that is only harder to do the larger you get. So I would rephrase, no SSL VPNs, 100, or sorry, zero people who do not have, MFA, and then turn the power off, turn it back on, see how it goes. I mean, that's what I would do over the next 3 months because I think that would be the things that would bring me the most resilience. Should I have an incident? Should something go wrong? Should I get a threat actor on my network?
All right. Well, maybe we should put you in charge over there. I freak out every time I have to shut down my laptop, so I can only imagine how difficult shutting down entire systems would be, but it makes total sense to me. Travis, from your perspective, obviously you're out here working with your government partners. What do you recommend for them to meaningfully limit some of the impacts that can happen when an incident hits?
Yeah, I agree with what Jay said. I think trying to reduce the attack surface, minimize the access or vulnerabilities of the month that they're having tremendous amounts of success. I think one of the biggest areas that I've seen is a couple things. One is what are the critical systems in the environment? Like our customers, what's really mission critical, and not just that system, but what are all the subsystems that's dependent on? So try to figure out within your enterprise organization, the data and the systems that are critical and all the things they depend on, and then kind of create a new boundary or a new mapping and try to figure out how to isolate that as much as possible from the rest of the environment, right? So you're only as strong as your weakest link, and the more direct paths of an attack or those trust relationships that maybe you don't have mapped yet. So try to identify what those things are or mechanisms that an attack could happen where maybe you don't have any visibility, right? So try to isolate that from the core systems and make sure that is as resilient as possible. Test the restoration, make sure the backups are working. Maybe you're not even doing backups. Make sure the security teams know who the backups are, right? So when you do recover, you don't reinfect the environment. So making sure some of those things are there. Um, Definitely trying to wait till a catastrophe or a disruption to happen to exercise this could be very problematic. I've seen some organizations that are hit with disruptive attacks, and their incident response plan was on the production system that they don't have access to, right? Or a calling list of folks if they're geographically dispersed. So, like planning and testing these plans proactively, not a tabletop where you're controlling the variables. The adversary has a lot more say in what happens next. So, kind of start planning for that in the future. And I think from a requirements perspective, make sure the requirements, typically what happens is requirements come out and they're overly static. The threat landscape, the environment, the attack posture is very fluid and dynamic. With AI now, it's changing almost on a weekly basis. So not every 5 to 10 years, the cycle is much shorter. So kind of making sure when you're looking at procurement acquisitions, you're building in the ability for those requirements to evolve more automatically over time and be more adaptive. And then that way you're not, building things for the last war, so to speak. And then Joanne's organization, General NASA, when we send things in space, the amount of planning, contingency planning, the proactive nature of their entire mission is something we probably could model in the cyber domain.
For sure. I think we were all glued to our screens a couple months ago or a month ago when Artemis was coming down, or at least I was. It was a big deal in our house over here. And I got to say, Travis, vulnerability of the month sounds like the worst subscription service. I want like a wine and cheese subscription. I don't want vulnerability of the month, but that all makes perfect sense to me. All right. Joanne, you are going to be the first up here in our closing question, and it's a two-parter because we've talked about a lot on today's session. So, looking forward here, what is one thing that you want to see agencies look towards to maybe get more proactive? What is one kind of best practice or one thing you want to see agencies kind of taking advantage of as they move forward? And second, if you had a takeaway that you wanted for our attendees to take away from this session, what would it be?
So again, I'm more practical than in my perspective on these things. I would say, well, I just going to the NASA thing. It is shocking to me that if an agency is not focused, does not have the focus that NASA has on security. Because I've never been to any other agencies. So I don't know what it's like out there. CISA probably has much better view of that. You need to be on top of it. You need to be on top of the updates. You need to do the basic things first. You don't do the basic things, you're never going to get to that point. We don't have a lot of incidents that I know of here because we are so strongly focused on that. And you just need it because, as noted, the bad actors out there, they are putting a lot of resources into this, and it's easy to just make a slight mistake and not even realize it until it's too late. So be careful there. And as I've noted, I think the main takeaway right now is just there is a lot going on out there. Try to be as educated as you can, as you need to be for the level that you're at. Not everybody needs to know all we just got one of these, CISA things, and it's got so many words that I have no idea what they're saying. But make sure somebody on your team knows what they're saying. But at least know that there's things happening and that you need to react to them. And that it's a constantly evolving. You're not going to get the 100%. So you need to take it really. The term that's out there is risk management. It's not supply chain certainty. It's not cybersecurity certainty. It's risk management. You need to manage it both on your side and on the security side. What do you want to manage, and how are you going to manage it? So risk is important. I don't think it's talked about much, like the levels. So.
For sure. All right, Jay, besides translating that memo that just landed on Joanne's desk, what is your takeaway from today's session, and what's one thing that you want folks to kind of be thinking about as they move towards more proactive cybersecurity in the future?
I mean, I love the supply chain conversation because it's such a delightfully impossible topic. Um, I would say the thing I hope people understand is, while the software quality in the United States is incredibly poor and will allow adversaries to get in and create incidents all the time, there are things you can do today to make it less bad when it does happen. And, you know, going through activities that don't matter when it, or sorry, going through activities that are kind of stinky when it doesn't matter is always better than going through hard activities when it does. So, for those of you who want to exercise an incident response plan, those of you who want to turn off your infrastructure and turn it back on, maybe actually validate your backups. Like actually take down your most important system and restore it from tape or disk or cloud, whatever you do. It is going through those activities where you're going to be more resilient and get home earlier when something bad happens.
Awesome. And getting home earlier is always the goal. It is always the goal for me at least. Travis, you get to have our final word here. What's one thing you want folks to be thinking about as they go through this transformation journey in the world of cybersecurity, and one takeaway?
Yeah, I think yeah, great points by Joanne and Jay. I think um, you know, you know, taking a risk now and
Mhm.
learning from it, improving the just like in sports and other things, if it's not called working out or training, right? If it was easy, you wouldn't be growing and getting better, right? If you weren't sore after exercising the next day, you probably didn't push yourself, right? And we can't be complacent. I mean, the cyberspace is a warfighting domain now, right? So
Mhm.
we're constantly in battle. We've got to be doing the same rigorous training and testing and drilling such that we're working the organization, we're working our vendors, processes, people to get better, right? If we're not feeling any pain in the preparation side, then we're not really going to be prepared in the wartime. So, and that includes, my past lives in the government space, and I'm probably straddled the fence over the years of being more operationally focused and technical, but also over, NTSB like investigations. Wow, these writing requirements and going through source selection, security analysts, really technical folks hate that kind of process. But when they go through procurement and things get acquired, and it's like, well, why did I get this junk or this gap? And it's because the requirements that went through the acquisition process didn't account for some of those things, right? So it's getting people to realize that investing proactively to work on those requirements, even though they feel compelled to stay in the operational element, that's going to have the biggest bang for the buck. So, yeah, I think kind of getting out of your comfort zone and focusing on some of those things will pay tremendous dividends. So, yeah, if you're not doing something that's uncomfortable, then you're leaving things on the table that will cause pain in the future. So,
Yeah. As someone who went to the gym yesterday and thought they were stronger than they are, that really resonates with me because I can't move my arms today. So I think we're all out there trying to get a little bit stronger and a little bit better in the realm of cybersecurity, of course. I want to thank our three terrific speakers for sharing their insights with us today, but unfortunately, we are out of time. Before you log off, though, I do have a few quick reminders. We have some great resources available for you to download, so don't miss out on one of those learning opportunities. We'll also be sending an on-demand version of this training, so look for that in your inboxes tomorrow. But on behalf of GovLoop and Rubric, I hope you enjoyed today's session. And as always, we really appreciate and value the work that you do. So thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at our next training. Bye, everybody.